The trade talks are picking up as we get closer and closer to the draft. Insider Dave Pagnotta of the fourth period indicates that he believes Montreal will trade a defenseman on draft night. We have to get into that and who the possibilities are, as that ties in nice to an article written by Marc Dumont highlighting some of the potential defensemen that could be fighting for Canadiens roster spots, meaning some of these other guys might have to be moved. All of that coming up on this episode of Habs Digest. You'll want to stick around, and let's just get straight into it, Jesse. This is getting tougher and tougher and tougher because the defense on the Montreal Canadiens, well, there's a reason Marc Dumont in his article today that I will link down below, he ranked the Habs defense organizational prospects a 9 out of 10 for good reason. There's a lot of fantastic prospects there, and there's a lot of guys we can talk about, right? He went in depth on Lane Hutson, which I'm sure we're going to mention. You got guys like Logan Mailloux, Justin Barron. But there's one guy that I wanted to focus on just first before we get into the others, and that's William Trudeau. He was talking about Struble before, and Struble, will be joined by defenseman William Trudeau, a player who saw his stock drop dramatically after earning his entry-level contract with a fantastic performance at Canadiens training camp. The good news, though, is that Trudeau's play improved by leaps and bounds as the season unfolded in the AHL. Jesse, I feel like we haven't talked enough about a guy who put up 24 points in the AHL by being just a solid player back there. Again, his stock did drop once he got his ELC. He didn't really show up for a while, but by the end of the season, Trudeau was incredibly reliable. And a reminder, he doesn't even turn 22 until October. I feel like this is one of the more underrated prospects that people aren't talking about that might be able to fight for a roster spot despite all of the left-handed defensive depth.
Yeah, Trudeau's good. Just because we got so many other defenders here, it's like you kind of forget about him a little bit, right? But when we saw him at Habs training camp last year, like this guy was standing out. And one of the things that really allowed him to separate himself was just like his mobility on the ice. And we know as a defender under Martin St. Louis' system that this is a type of player that can really do well. So it's because we have such a plethora, one of the deepest and also most talented decors in the whole NHL. I think sometimes we forget about that. We think it's all depth and that the talent isn't there, but it's there. It's just because we got guys like Hudson, Reinbacher, Mailloux, Engstrom kind of coming that we forget about guys like Trudeau that on a lot of other teams would be a very sought after defensive prospect.
Yeah, a 21-year-old? Like, he's not even 22, and he's like one of the core pieces of that Laval team. So, and I know, realistically, there's too many left-handed D to go around. You have Harris, you have Struble, you have Hudson, you have Guhle, you have Matheson, and then you have Trudeau. There's too many, but you never know who's going to get moved. And we'll get into who might get moved a bit later, I think. But I think he's one of those candidates that can really step up. But obviously, the crux of this, Jesse, is of them being rated a 9 out of 10 is simply the pure depth of star talent. And David Reinbacher, while Marc Dumont does speculate that Reinbacher's probably going to have to spend a good chunk of this year, if not all this year, in the AHL, which makes a lot of sense, just to refine some of his game, even though he had 5 points in 11 games, which is nothing to scoff at for your North American debut there. There is so much depth. And when it comes to this Habs prospect pool, is there any other group in the league that even comes close? Because some of these guys, even the guys in Russia, like Bogdan Konyushkov, and even a couple guys I'll bring up in a second, are just it feels like there's too much to go around.
It's true. And you almost feel like we should have kind of selected a little bit more of the forwards, right? But kind of defensemen, it's one of those things that you need to get right for a rebuild, and you kind of build off of that. So I feel like even though it looks like somewhat of a mistake, no, this is carefully calculated from Kent Hughes. He knew what we had in the cupboard with our prospects before he got in. He definitely chose to draft a whole lot more, right? But we're going to see, sometimes you think you have so many, but these injuries happen. That's why I don't want us just trading away all of our young guys because we think that, that we got a couple good ones. Obviously, some are going to really rise to the top, and then some are going to disappear as well, but you're still going to want that depth all the same. Obviously, a trade does need to get done in the near future, but by no means does that mean trading all of our defensive prospects.
No, for sure. And again, there's so many guys, a lot of times, even on defense, especially goalies, but a lot of time on defense too, guys might just come out of nowhere. Usually, but not all the time. And the Habs still have a couple Russian guys that you guys maybe haven't heard of, prospects. I'm just going to bring these up before we move on to the next section. First is Daniil Sobolev. He actually played on the Brantford Bulldogs with Florian Xhekaj there. Had 5 goals in 31 games, which is an impressive offensive performance, though he was 21. He's a big, hefty guy. Now, we're not really sure what he projects as. I mean, he could go to the ECHL. I don't believe he has a spot on Laval right now, but he's a right-handed shot, hefty defenseman with a solid shot, decent goal-scoring upside, it seems. You never really know. And also Dmitry Kostenko, who had a pretty decent year as a 21-year-old in the KHL. I know only 4 points in 52 games. And he's 6 foot 167, but for a guy his size, at his age, just being able to play 52 games and having okay minutes in the KHL is kind of impressive. Jesse, just that this final thing before we move on, like these guys, even Bogdan too, you never know which guys are going to jump out of the woodwork, which is why I think, like, even though these guys maybe have that super, super low ceiling, guys that are almost certainly never going to make the NHL, I think it's just worth discussing them just in the case that maybe the perfect set of circumstances comes along to push them into this organization.
And Bogdan Konechkov is one of those players that kind of came out of nowhere, but obviously since then, we're all aware of what a great player he is, and he's definitely representing for our prospects over in Russia right now in a league where young guys barely don't play ever. He's basically leading his team in ice time. Like, this is wild. Like, Bogdan also in a league where young guys don't get played at all. Igor Larionov, of all people, your head coach, names you captain, halfway during your season. Like, this is unheard of. This is a young guy that's doing amazing things. Obviously, we would prefer to have him in North America, but he's developing over there. And I do believe that he will be a key part of the Montreal Canadiens' future.
Yeah, I believe so too. And there's a lot of defensive guys we could get into. We spent too long talking about that, but let us know your thoughts about the Habs defensive system down below. We're going to get into the next part of the video though, and that is the trade talks. Now, we teased this at the start of the show. It's something that we got to bring up. Dave Pagnotta, you love him or you hate him, whatever. He does have some inside connections. And he said, quote, "It's no secret the Montreal Canadiens want to add a scorer this summer." Of course, Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton has made that clear. And they plan to dangle some of their young defensemen as bait. Habs GM Kent Hughes isn't afraid to pull the trigger on a deal at/around the NHL draft. And that seems to be his target again this June. And I mean, that's something we believe, but, to hear it seems to be his target. He's willing to dangle these young defensemen. We're hearing these talks pick up. You never know if this is the Habs organization trying to push that out there to get other people's gears spinning. But Jesse, when we talk about all these guys, you have too many left-handed D, I think especially. And even now, your right-hand defense is kind of stacking up as well. When you look at guys like Engstrom, who has NHL upside, Hudson already could be on the NHL roster. And then you have Guhle and Matheson. And then you still have Harris and Struble, who are going to be extremely solid players on like more than half the teams in the NHL, probably more. Is there a favorite to be traded? To me, like, I feel like when I'm looking at these guys, the Habs want to hold on to Hudson. I feel like Engstrom could have some really surprisingly high value for some teams, but I feel like Jordan Harris and Jayden Struble, those are two guys that so many teams in the NHL, they'd be begging to have a young defenseman with the upside of these guys, maybe more so Harris, and I feel like the Habs could get a really good return without sacrificing too much on that left side, like organizationally, depth-wise.
And it's not even a choice anymore. It's the Montreal Canadiens in the trades that they make this summer are forced to involve some of their defensemen. We're just at a place now where basically we're going to be losing them for nothing otherwise, right? And I think you bring up a great point, in Struble and Harris. I think, Jayden Struble has, definitely endeared himself to a lot of Habs fans this year. So you have to feel like Jordan Harris is a little bit more on the hot seat, but I would argue even more Jonathan Kovacevic, even though he's still kind of a young player as well, you kind of know what his ceiling is. Where Jordan Harris, you're kind of getting a feel for it, but he can still surprise you, right? He can come out next year and with some really improved play as well, right? So I think the safer play would be, trading the guys that you can, without sacrificing those players that you're not quite sure what the upside is yet. We definitely want to be patient, but the fact of the matter is we're definitely, you're looking at multiple defensive trades this summer.
That's a fantastic point, actually. Someone like Harris, you're starting to see that ceiling emerge. Someone like Struble still needs a bit of time before we know, but we know he'll be physical, and we know like that offensive upside could be there. That's what we're still trying to gauge. But like you said, a guy like Kovacevic, right? You know where it's going to be. So many of these young guys, though, it's hard to tell. Someone like an Adam Engstrom. So it's always scary, but no matter what, I think the Habs are going to have to take a calculated risk, but we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down below. Who should get traded? If you had to pick someone, my choice is one of Harris or Struble. Jesse is Kovacevic. I think Kovacevic on an expiring deal. A contender might pay a pretty penny for that, but there's a lot of potential options, and we'd love to hear all your thoughts down below, because that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel, guys. We're pushing. We're going to have videos all off season long. NHL draft date confirmed May 7th. Stick around for a live stream then. We hope to see you there. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.